Hi, welcome to my show where I interview really interesting people that have incredible stories to share and who are doing great service for the community. And today I have with me my niece, Sandy. Welcome, Sandy.
Hello.
Um, well, Sandy is with us today not only because she's my niece.
That's pretty special, though.
Yes, she does get a privilege, of course. However, she has to also be accomplished, and she is. And she is actually going to be teaching. She's a yoga instructor. She's been practicing yoga for over 20 years. And she will be the instructor at the Path of Consciousness Spiritual and Writing Retreat, which we are having from October 5th to the 7th at Columbia, which is in Clarkston. She is going to be teaching the yoga classes because, again, her credentials, she's been practicing and she's been teaching for many years. I know how long you've been practicing. I don't know how long you've been teaching. So can you share
over
that?
5, I'd say, I think it's about 6 years now.
Okay.
But full time, probably 2 to 3 at this point.
And where do you teach yoga?
Most of my classes are actually at General Motors Corporation. So on the Tech Center campus in Warren, at the Renaissance Center in Detroit, and then at the UAW General Motors building in also Detroit, down a little bit away from the Renaissance Center.
Okay, so you have classes in different areas, and so what is the best way for people to know your schedule or to find out about what kind your classes and how can they, or your, I know you have other events sometimes that,
Yeah, so I do Sunday classes, and it's somewhat flexible. It changes with the weather, which is kind of nice. So as the weather gets better, we're going to be outside on Sundays, and so that's really going to be my only public class as I'm ending my studio class that I'm teaching on Fridays. So that's in a local studio.
Where can they find out about you?
They
Should they
can
go on the website or a Facebook page? Or
Creative Energy Yoga.
Okay.
And there's a website, creativeenergyyoga.com.
Mhm.
You can find me on Facebook, the same, or you can even just, look up my name on Facebook and it links up to Creative Energy Yoga. And
Great.
so there's a outdoor or indoor class Sundays, depending on the weather, and that's all posted there.
Okay, great. So I was introduced to yoga. Actually, I wasn't aware of your interest in it until we somehow we got interested on in a separate way. But I got interested in yoga because I was taking classes with a Native American couple who were teaching me a lot about spirituality, and then we started doing certain exercises that resembled yoga. That also happened to be the kind of exercises we were taught back home in Iraq. They seem so basic, but over here we're not really taught them how to do them. And so I started taking classes at Lifetime, and then I started seeing the difference, that it really felt good. It de-stressed me, So there was a lot of benefits to it. To me, this is how I came upon it. And then I just continued. It's just something that felt good. It felt right. It was very relaxing, and I continued at that point. I think I've read your story online about how you started, doing yoga, but I'd like you to share it.
Yeah. So I was 17, and it was my last semester in high school when I saw on PBS it was like a class for senior citizens. And so I sat down and was really intrigued by what we were doing, and I told my friends in school about it, and they were joking around and they were kind of teasing me about how funny it was that I was doing this thing with this older person, which it's like,
what was it though?
It was like for senior citizens on PBS. It was a yoga.
Oh, there was a yoga.
Yeah, there was a yoga class.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it started off where it was like they're kind of teasing me, and then one of them went to Florida and she bought a tape, and it was a Kundalini yoga tape where it's just audio, and there's a practice on the front of the cassette and a practice on the back, and so I received this gift, and then in the summer, towards my first semester of college, I started to play around with it. And that's when I realized I was getting so many different benefits from it. I had and still do have scoliosis, but I had a lot of back pain for most of my childhood, which is, unnecessary. So I needed some strength, and I needed to learn about how to use my body more properly and support it so that I would feel less pain and have more movement. And so my posture improved, and my mental clarity improved to the degree where I could feel good about focusing on what I had to read, the reading material for school, or if I had to actually speak in front of the class, I felt more impelled to raise my hand and actually speak because I was always shy to do such a thing. So I found that it was giving me so many benefits. And so what started off as happenstance, moment of my life, it turned into something that, 21 years later, it's become my life and will continue to be.
Well, and see, and this is what I haven't looked into this too much because it was just for me. It's like it felt good, it felt right. I kept going back to it because I could see that my body was benefiting and mentally I was benefiting spiritually. So I was listening to my body, and that's why I continued to go back to the classes. After I got married and had kids, it was very difficult to get to the gym, and I left it for a while, and I could see my body would get more aches and pains. And when I got back into it, when I would drop off the kids in the daycare center where Lifetime is, and they have this daycare center right in the same building, I would go in like in a frenzy. And I was just, I was so nervous of the kids. And then I would go in there and I would come out like, oh, hi, lovely kids, kissing, hugging, giving them words. I don't know what the magic was. I didn't, I haven't looked very deep into that. And I have you here today to help us understand what happens in there that you go in really feeling. And I've had experiences not just with regards to my kids, but also as a writer. Sometimes the distractions, when you're certain careers require that you need a lot of focus. You need to disconnect from distractions. And so that was another way. Sometimes when I was really unable to focus on my next chapter and I could feel something is pulling at me, I would just literally stop everything and hit a yoga studio. And I know that you've encouraged me to do that at home, and I have tried sometimes. But I feel that when I go to the yoga studio, it's so intense that the benefit I receive is a lot stronger because the instructor. I really believe that working with professionals is very important, and I give so much credit to the atmosphere that the instructor creates. And I've been to your classes too, and they're wonderful too. The environment that you guys create, the instructions, and so. But what is happening in there that we come out, so like it seems so magical that you come out a different person.
Yeah. So there's a few ways to look at it, and if we just look at it really quick, about maybe a more modern way of looking at it is we're essentially manipulating your nervous system. And so there's a sympathetic nervous system and there's a parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic is going to kind of help you figure out if there's some sort of stress that you're facing, if you need to, fight that thing, or if you need to run away from it. And so it's like more of a survival mechanism. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is what we're really working with. So we're kind of simmering down the sympathetic nervous system and saying, okay, nothing crazy is happening right now. You can settle down. And then we focus on this other part of ourselves that triggers something extremely important, which is a relaxation response. And so when we're breathing, really that's the key. You can be sitting down and stretching and breathing like a maniac, hyperventilating even, and your body's not going to really understand that it's actually time to stretch your muscles and relax. And so the breath is the cue. And it happens that the exhalation is really the cue for the parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. So whenever we're really stressed out and something happens where, we get something done, let's just say something was on our plate, we finally get it done, you just naturally have this sigh. And so your body says, oh, now I can relax, thank goodness. But when we're practicing yoga, we're actually intentionally saying, in and out, in and out. This is where our mind is. This is where our focus is. And so we start to say, nothing's wrong. Everything is right. And so I can actually relax and I can breathe and I can just focus on this breath, which, if we kind of transition to this more maybe modern day of looking at it into, a way that's been described for thousands of years. So yoga goes back at least 5,000 years and originated in northern India. And at that time, even then, this idea of breath control is major, and it's recognized in many different traditions and many traditions of yoga, as there are many. But pranayama is one of the major foundations of this practice, and prana means life force. And so life force can also be understood as energy. And so prana, life force, yama is control. So we're controlling our energy, we're controlling this life force, which is expressed through breath.
Wow. You know what? This, as you were talking about this, it reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever seen a movie called Midnight Express.
I think I've heard of it. I don't
Okay,
remember.
it's a true life story of this American who was caught trying to smuggle hashish from Turkey. He was trying to, and then he was caught at the airport, and then he had to go to a Turkish prison. And first he was his name is Billy Hayes, and first he was sentenced to, I think, like 4 years, and then when it was time for him to leave, like a couple of weeks before that, they decided to give him like a life sentence or 25 years additional. And anyway, in the movie you see him doing yoga. Then it's a very interesting film because he ends up escaping. Okay, once they told him that he had a life sentence, then it's like his mind decided that he's going to be in escape mode. How do I get out of here? Okay. But in his interviews, because he became an actor and a filmmaker, and he does a lot of projects. So once I was reading interviews about him, and this is what he said. Before I got arrested, I discovered yoga. And I've literally done yoga every day for 40 years. It's the only thing that saved me in jail, physically and emotionally. And in Hollywood. Emotionally, you have to be really tough to be in this business. Yoga just helps keep me balanced every day. Imagine this person in a prison that he was tortured like almost every day, not knowing if he... And this was how he focused. And then there was another person that they interviewed, an American who was also one of his cellmates, who also ended up leaving, but I don't know that he escaped or he just left naturally. But he said that the way he survived it was that he got up every day in the morning, did yoga, prayed, he wrote, and he read. And those were the mechanisms that really saved him. So these are ancient teachings that really are, they can heal. They're transformational. And so if this was like their survival tool, imagine, so for us just to connect to that 1 hour within ourselves to that degree, and I think sometimes people don't understand the power and the necessity of that.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to approach this connection to ourselves. And so in his description, he pointed to some major things. First of all, I've defined yoga for myself personally as a saving grace. And it sounds like so has he. And so we all have some sort of saving grace. We are blessed if we can find it. If we cannot find it, there's definitely struggle, right? Because there is naturally challenges and pressures that we face every day. So obviously his are extreme, but the kind of life that we live now is also pretty extreme if you think about the way
It's very stressful. Yes.
It's a very fast-paced, technology-driven, and there's plenty of distractions all around. And so that leads me into the other aspect of, he felt balanced, and he minimized distractions, which even in this sort of a situation in prison, when you're tortured, right, you could have distractions simply in your mind, all the worries and fears and anxieties that are going to happen. We face these kinds of things all the time. And so when people go to their practice, if they continue all of those thoughts, if they continue all of these distractions mentally and, why did that person say this to me earlier today? And I'm so mad about that thing yesterday. Actually, you'll come out not feeling that different. But we narrow the distractions because we start to focus on maybe one thing. So maybe just the breath. And then when you're breathing, you have to continue this breath. That's the challenge, is to keep breathing so deeply, so much with control, that when the teacher says, okay, now come into this next posture, and maybe it's a balancing posture, or maybe you have to hold it for a really long time, and it puts a lot of pressure on the physical body, you can transcend that by breathing. And so even though you're in a challenging posture, you're breathing so well that it doesn't feel that bad. It doesn't feel so challenging. It actually feels good. So we can take what we learn in that setting into our everyday life. And when we feel pressured by deadlines, or we feel, pressured by children fighting and not giving us a sense of like, let me just hold on, everyone just stop. It's like, what do you turn to? Turn to your breath. You've trained in very difficult situations with your physical body. Now you can actually, center in and feel that sense of balance, which is the point of yoga, really, is to balance and integrate all of the aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, that is so well said. Even as you're describing this, he did mention in a separate interview on YouTube that in their prison you're always surrounded by people. There's people constantly, and people yelling, and people being beaten all the time. And he said that when he would do yoga, when he would return to the cells, the people yelling and screaming, and none of that would touch him the way that before he did the yoga. And so now when you're describing that, it's like, okay, it's all, like, some people just do it. You don't have to sit there. Like myself, I just reap the benefits. I don't want to know the details, and but then now it's all making sense based on what he said, how you're explaining it in further detail, and so yeah, and I want to add also, this is something that was fairly new to me. So like, my mom moved in about 4 years ago to my house, and she's in a wheelchair. And so one of the things that the complication, and the doctor said, you're not going to be able to handle her on your own, and it just seemed like going to be such a difficult task. Well, one of the things I found out, that I had developed so much strength from yoga, and that's another thing that people don't. I remember one time my nephew Montana, he came up to me, and he just came right. He came to my house. He hardly visits, even though he's across the street. He came. He walked to me. He said, "I did not know yoga was that hard." He said he couldn't finish a class, and I was so proud, because I'm like, yes, I can, and you can't. But it really builds muscle. A lot of the weight, we're carrying our weight. And so I ended up being able to help my mother. And I think this is one of the reasons I was able to have her help live with me, is because of yoga. Is that because my family, like, how are you doing this? And I said, not only because of how I learned how my muscles grew as I did yoga, but I also learned the balancing postures that I can actually, when I'm lifting or repositioning her, I feel like, oh my gosh, this is how I learned in yoga to stay still in one posture, how I can stay focused, how I use my weight in certain areas. So really, that was so helpful. And then because the way I was carrying her weight was new, the way I was positioning her, sometimes I would get backaches, and my solution would be to go to yoga, so that my back can heal, and so that I can help maintain, I had to make sure to take care of myself in order to continue taking care of her. And so, but that's one thing that I knew also, and that was after years. And I only go, because how my schedule is. I literally go once a week, but I've been consistent for over 13 years. And so for people who feel like, I don't have the time, I don't have this, if you just even do it that once a week, or even if you start off just once a month, but it does, your body remembers these exercises. They're so ancient, and the muscle remembers when you go back to it.
Yeah. And when I say that, I've been practicing yoga for 21 years, right? I'm coming up on that. I don't actually mean that I go to a yoga practice or practice in my, in my room for an hour a day. That actually doesn't happen. What happens is, You know, it may have started off that way where I was very focused and intentional and consistent, but the consistency is where now it is integrated into my day. So when I wake up, something happens, right? Some sort of movement happens to open up some channels. And then I sit down and I'm quiet for 5, 10, 15 minutes to just meditate for a little bit. And then I get up and I'm so centered for the rest of the day mentally. But then later, I'll have sat in my chair for a while. I'll have done some things where now I feel my hips are really tight. So I'll do some pigeon poses for 5 minutes. And so it's like, you know, you could take a class a week if that works. You could take a class a month if that works. But if someday you just slowly say like, hey, I'm sitting at my desk and I'm doing neck stretches.
Yes.
Hey, I'm noticing that I feel really achy in
That's
my back.
a good
and so I'm
point,
just gonna,
because
you know,
I do, and I didn't realize this, but I do also do this, and it's because I'll feel like there's been too many, I have deadlines, and so I'm sitting at my computer too much. I'll start standing up and doing certain, and that's,
So
see,
it's
it became,
integrated.
and I didn't even realize, but I'll even put my leg on the desk, and then I'll like do stretching exercises, because sometimes I have to do research by viewing a video, and I'm like, okay, while I'm viewing this video, I'll do certain stretching exercises. So you're right. I guess that's the thing. You pick up so much, it becomes so much part of your life. And in your case, you're even like, you were at your kids' school teaching this. You've taught it to kids. I have some wonderful pictures here that I'd like to share. This is at your kid's school, right?
Yeah, this is
Teaching.
my little one in kindergarten, Mateo. He's 5. He's right in front of me, if you can see.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, so they were doing March Reading Month, and so they had like surprise readers, I think it was like every day or every so often. And so I was the last one, so it was March 31st, I think. And I had a book called I Am Yoga that my sister Angela gifted to my older son before. And so as I read the book, I didn't know what was going to happen, which is really what yoga helps with, is like you're ready. You're ready for whatever comes your way. And so I read the book, but as we went through the book page by page, we did the postures. And so the kids had a really good time, and so we would spread out through the room, but in the beginning they were all fidgety. By the end, it was so beautiful. Actually, I want to share with you really quick.
Sure.
The book starts with this, this little girl against this big world, this earth against her back. And she's like, sometimes it just feels like everything is just like on top of me, and it's hard, and I feel so small in such a big world. And then by the end, she goes through these postures, and she's lying down in Shavasana, and she says, at the end, she's holding this little world in her hands. And so she feels like more in control. She feels more, just more aware and in control of her life, right? This little girl. And so I said to them while they were lying down in the final resting pose where we just relax, that, just imagine that now you're holding the world in your hands. And I didn't really think for them to move their hands together, but then half of them were lying there so sweet, and they put their hands together like this as if they were holding it. And then I just said,
oh, wow.
Actually put your hands together and just imagine that you're holding the world in your hands. And I just,
oh my
gosh, such
gosh.
a beautiful feeling and experience. So I really learned from every experience of teaching.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Well, I have some other, obviously you did talk about your, you do outdoor class. I've done that once. I was in California and I did an outdoor class. Actually, no, I've done it also at Lifetime. They have by the pool, like in the summertime, they'll have, that's really an amazing experience to be out in nature. And so you do these, you said, in the summertime as well.
Yeah,
You'll
and
be
this
starting
is with
that.
actually a high school with the soccer team. I was just kind of volunteering to do that with the girls' JV and varsity team. But every Sunday we do, when the weather's nice, I kind of keep people updated through the week as I pay attention to the weather and say we will be outside or we won't be outside. Because I feel very close to nature, and the first time I ever really practiced in a class setting outside was special. But before that, I had been finding that those were the most memorable moments of my life. And so that says keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and this is the Theosophical Society. Okay.
And so we form into a circle. And so the idea is, usually I talk about the unity of life here, and so experiencing that in one way or another, and kind of relating ourselves to people or to animals or to plants, and just seeing the world as a whole, which is essentially the goal of yoga, is to join. It's to come into this feeling of wholeness.
Now, my favorite pictures are the where I mean,
Look at the junk food behind me, though.
look at the art and
Yeah.
you know the art, and then you it just looks so beautiful in the
Yeah.
sun. It's so colorful. I love that picture.
A friend of mine, he goes around and looks at all the art. His name is Tom, and he goes around Detroit and looks at all the murals. It's just a thing he loves to do. So one day we said, hey, why don't we just go and take a bunch of yoga pictures around? And so we went to a few.
Oh, is this where you took this one then?
This is also in Detroit.
Oh,
This
wow.
is right by the farmer's market, the
Okay.
Eastern Market.
Cool.
And this, she's actually holding a heart,
Oh.
which, meant a lot to me because I had a second son who passed away because of a heart situation, and he was 9 days old. And so when I saw that, it hit me kind of as it was happening, and then as I did it, and I just thought, whew.
Well, and I was gonna say, so I think that what's so special about you, you're a yoga instructor, but you're really also a healer, I think. And it is because of now when you mentioned, I think the loss of your son, usually when we have that kind of an experience, we have so much compassion so that when we're working with somebody, we offer so much more than what seems, what's visible. Like, I feel like even though I call myself a writer, but I want to bring in so many healing aspects and transformational aspects through my writing. And I feel like you do that through yoga. And we only have a few more minutes. And people, check out her website. And also she will be doing a class at the writing and spiritual retreat, the Path of Consciousness, which, by the way, I know that you've also used that as a practice, writing with yoga, because you even did one class where I participated in that, and you journaling with yoga. But if you have one advice to give people that if they're interested about this but not sure what to do, what would be one advice that you would give them that they can take home or today?
I would just say consider the benefits of yoga in terms of, how can it help? Most likely, how could it help the stress? How could it help you change the way you see stressful situations? And then potentially use those situations to actually help you grow. And so yoga can be that support system to help you manage the natural pressures that we will face in life, because actually the pressures are precious. They are what help us grow. And so you could start small. You could do 5 minutes of something a day. You can find somebody online and just follow that for a little bit. Or you could get books and self-study, that's how I began for many years.
Yeah, it's as simple as you don't have to straight away go to a class or something.
There's so many aspects to it, so I would just say there are so many physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual benefits that it's worth checking out.
Well, Sandy, thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to you teaching that class. I will be participating.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you,
It was
for having
lovely
me.
having you.
Thank you.